Sorry, just 1 second. Okay, I'm also gonna.
Yeah.
During
Yeah, yeah.
About the end. Hello, hello. All right, let me see if we've got everybody in here. Cool, okay. All right, so welcome to this year's Young Dems Spring Forum. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm sure that most of you have heard about the UAW student worker strike, which has staged picket lines around UW, so we had to move online tonight. But nonetheless, YDUW and the LDs that we're working with tonight want to express our solidarity with those participating in the strike and wish them the best on their negotiations with the university. Getting into the forum now, I'm Evan. I'm our comms director and our 43rd District Democrats representative for the club. We've got the rest of our e-board on this meeting as well, including our president, Nolan Degarle, and Vivek Prakriya, who will also be student moderators with me tonight. We're super lucky to have done this the last couple of years and kind of just provide a space for local candidates to connect with the community, especially students here on campus. This year, we have the candidates for Seattle City Council Seat 8 special election. So I'd love to welcome them. We've got Alexis Mercedes Rink, Santina Sanchez, Tarek Youssef, and Tanya Wu here tonight. And we are super excited to hear from them. Let's see, before we get started, the University of Washington acknowledges the Coast Salish peoples of this land, the land which touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Duwamish, Squamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. Acknowledging the ceded and unceded land on which we all stand could not be more important in our current historical moment, and we encourage you all to visit nativeland.ca to learn more. We would also like to thank the incredibly supportive LDs we've gotten to work with putting this forum together. Seattle's 36th, 37th, 43rd, and 46th District Democrats have been such a pleasure to work with, and tonight would not be possible at all without their help. Getting into the breakdown of tonight, the forum is going to be split up into a few different sections. We'll start with candidate intros, get to hear a little bit about them, and then get into a lightning round, which will be explained further. Then we'll move into our structure questions, and somewhere in there, we will send out a little link for you all to send your questions into us for the candidates. That should come out on the Google form, and we'll end the night with those. Yeah, so I think that is everything. We can get started if you want to take that away, Nolan or Vivek.
Hey everyone.
You're muted.
Oh, am I muted? Oops. All right, there we go. All right, thank you everyone. Yeah, so my name is Nolan. I am the president of YDUW and just having a little bit of computer trouble here, but we'd like to start this off with a round of introductions. So every candidate is going to have 2 minutes to give a little opening statement. And just let us know like who you are, why you're running, and anything else you think is relevant about you or your platform. So yeah, do we just start this off in a random order, I guess? We have any kind of
I think we start with Alexis.
Yeah.
A little bit of Santina, Tariq, then
start with oh, by the way, I should say I think we decided when you have a minute left, you will get this piece of paper. When you have 30 seconds left, you will get this piece of paper, just as a reminder of how much time you have left. So yeah, without further ado, let's go to Alexis, and you can give your opening statement.
Wonderful. Thank you everyone for having me here tonight. My name is Alexis Mercedes Rink. I'm a renter, a transit rider. I used to be a waitress, and now I'm running for Seattle City Council to fight for a city that works for all of us, not just a select few. Throughout my public policy career, I've gained a reputation for bringing people together around solutions and making them happen. I was a community organizer leading marches, rallies, and sit-ins. I got my master's degree at the UW, and since then I've worked across 39 cities and with over 100 different organizations in my career. I've championed agreements with unanimous votes from city councils, and I've led the development of a countywide 5-year plan to address homelessness. I was brought to this work because of my upbringing. I am proudly raised by my grandparents. My birth parents met in a gang when they were teenagers, and after my birth dad went to prison, my birth mom lost custody of me. And if it were not for my grandparents, I would have gone to the foster care system. But I got the chance to grow up in a resource community, in a proud union household, and I was given the tools I needed to heal. I am here today as a living testament to when we invest in young people, regardless of their beginnings, we can change generations. My birth dad is alive today because of a transitional housing program. We need to protect those investments. In the wake of a budget crisis at our city, we need to balance our budget and pursue progressive revenue because it is time for the wealthy to pay their fair share so we can keep our libraries open, we can develop housing, we can expand our transit system, and we can help folks recover and keep our communities safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we're going to go on to Sonatina.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sonatina Sanchez. I was born in Seattle and I grew up down in the Holly Park neighborhood and then moved into the Kingway apartments and then up to Yesler Terrace for the final years that I was in Seattle as a child. I moved back to Seattle for college and I went to Seattle University for communications and religious studies. And then I went to Seattle Central Community College, back when it was still community college, for database design. And I've been involved in a lot of industries here in Seattle area. I was a software tester for many years. I worked starting as a volunteer, moving up to festival staff, and finally full-time staff at the Seattle International Film Festival. I've been a work study student and transitioned into a regular volunteer at Treehouse for Kids. I've done work with the Literacy Source. I've volunteered with MoHi and almost any other like agency or cultural service you could think of in Seattle. I really do love working with this city and making it the best place it can be for all of us. I was born here when we still had a modicum of a social safety net that was being dismantled under Reagan. And I've seen how the lack of that social safety net has really fundamentally disenchanted people from our system. And so having the background that I do with Seattle and with the political system and the 20 years of experience in organizing with organizations like Transit Riders Union and the League of Women Voters of Seattle-King County, I want to bring the private work I've done into public service and serve Seattle in a great holistic way. Thanks.
All right, thank you. And then we're going to move on to Council Member Tanya Wu. So go ahead and give your opening statement.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Tanya Wu. My family immigrated here in 1887. I lived most of my life here in South Seattle. I was raised in Beacon Hill, and today I reside in the Rainier Valley. I grew up working in my family's small business, which had locations in Wallingford, U District, Seattle Center, and the Chinatown International Districts. But wherever my work has taken me across Seattle, one passion has remained the same, and that's lifting the voices of those who are marginalized. I am deeply involved in the Chinatown International District community, which is the poorest neighborhood in the city and the nation's most endangered neighborhood as well. I have fought against continued government discrimination there, against a government that wasn't meant for people of color. I'm trying to make those changes from the inside. For 4 years, I have run a volunteer group called the Community Watch, which I consider the alternative to policing. We walk the streets at night, providing mutual aid to the unhoused. We connect people to resources, and I have administered Narcan and performed CPR. Building affordable housing is also something I know about. I'm an affordable housing developer and provider. I helped renovate and restore the historic Louisa Hotel into workforce apartments, which only charges our occupants a portion of their income so that no one is forced to pay a rent they cannot afford. So these complex issues demand hands-on solutions. And from leading community watch patrols to organizing against racial discrimination, building workforce housing, and even administering Narcan on the streets, I've always taken direct action. And you deserve compassionate, pragmatic, hardworking leadership that understands our most vulnerable communities. And every day, I strive to bring hands-on solutions to the City Council and fulfill that commitment to our constituents.
All right, thank you. And then finally, Tariq Yusuf.
Evening, everyone. My name is Tarek Yusuf. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the candidate for Seattle City Council position 8. Um, Opposite of Sonatina, I grew up in Kingway Apartments and then moved to New Holly, and relied a lot on social programs to uplift myself and my family and be able to be in the privileged position to be here today. I'm running because I relied on the Seattle culture of community and generosity, something that is currently missing from the current city policies run by the mayor and the current city council. I relied on public housing. I relied on King County and Seattle Public Health, food stamps, Running Start when I went to community college, and the Husky Promise for my undergrad degree. I believe that social safety nets provide a key part of the story to help people like myself move up and become strong members of society and contributing to the places around them. I've been frustrated and complained a lot about the state of the city's social safety net and how it's eroded over the past 5, 10, 15 years. And frankly, I'd like to change that. I think that the city council needs to have a voice of empathy, a voice that listens to people, and a voice that ultimately is in the best interest of the people around us, not just for those who are rich and powerful and have held the reins of the city for far too long. Thank you.
All right, thank you to all the candidates for those opening statements. Now we're going to go into a quick lightning round where you are going to be presented with a series of I will or I would questions, and you'll just have to agree or disagree by doing a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So doing that will be Vivek. So I'll hand the computer back off to him.
Yeah, this should be exciting. So yeah, like Nolan said, just kind of a lightning round, kind of your instinct. So the first question is, I would support a capital gains tax. Awesome. I support the construction of more high density housing. Great. I support access to abortion. Awesome. I stand with the UAW student workers strike. Cool. I've used Seattle public transit in the last month. Cool. I've used Seattle public transit in the last week. Great. I would support a ban on street sweeps during the winter. I'm a renter. Okay. I'm a homeowner. I support a ceasefire in Gaza. Great. I'm a landlord. Awesome. And last question. I would support stricter zoning laws to better manage urban sprawl and preserve green spaces. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, that concludes our lightning round. Pretty fast as is lightning.
All right. Right there. You're good? Cool. Alrighty. So we're gonna get into our more structured form questions now. Each candidate will be asked the same question and we will rotate who answers each question first. For example, Alexis, you will answer the first question first. Sonatina, you answer the second question first. Tariq the third, and so on. And then we'll circle back around just so everybody gets a chance to not be on the spot first. You'll each have 2 minutes to answer. we are going to split up moderating, me, Vivek, and Nolan. And we will have the same red and yellow papers just to indicate how much time you have left in your answer, so you can keep track of that. Yellow is going to be 1 minute, and red is going to be 30 seconds, probably time to wrap it up. So yeah, I think we're ready for that. Sophia as well, yeah. There is now a link in the chat that will take you to a little Google form so that you all can submit your questions that you want to hear asked, and we will get to a few of those after this. Yeah, so we will get started. Sophia, if you want to be ready to mute me and then unmute Vivek as well in just a second once I'm done. But we will get started. You wanna unmute Vivek?
All right. I'm back, and it's our first question, 1 sec, will be on the topic of transportation. Okay, so what strategies do you propose to improve reliability and accessibility of public transportation and make the city more pedestrian and bike friendly? We're going to go, I think, in reverse order from how we did the opening statements. So Tarek, you now have 2 minutes. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Yeah, transit and alternative forms of commuting are going to be critical to both addressing the climate crisis and also just helping with challenges of density that we have in our community. One of the big things that I think needs to be addressed is alternative commute safety. I say this as someone who got involved in a hit and run while I was using a bike lane a couple of weeks ago. And so I would support the development of more protected bike lanes and greenways throughout the city. I would also support the kind of increase of frequency in buses as we expand the light rail, similar to what has been being done throughout Snohomish County and other regional transit authorities. I also would like to kind of expand and ensure that and maintain programs that keep students, give students and young people access to transit and focus on building a transit first city. And one of the goals that I have with transit is to be able to get wherever you need to go in at least no more than 50% of the time than it would be to drive. And I think that is a goal that helps center individuals that use the system and helps make it a better choice for everybody.
All right, now Councilmember Wu.
As I think we have a opportunity in the transportation levy coming up to make an investment in sidewalks and bridges. And I believe that promotes safety and pedestrians, for bikers, for everybody. Because there are a lot of sidewalks that need to be built out to allow people to have access to public transportation, and that's part of the levy. I think we need to be more ambitious. So I think looking at other areas in which we can invest in more sidewalks and reliability and accessibility of our roads. And, you know, we could have both. We can have safety for bikes, for walkers. It doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. And so I think it's making sure all the stakeholders are involved, Cascade Bicycle Club, neighborhood greenways, and seeing what their opinions are regarding this levy and their suggestions to how we can move forward. I believe the people who are closest to the problem also have the solutions, and making sure that we listen, gather all these thoughts, and be able to implement them. So I agree with everything that was said, and I'm sure will be said, because this is a huge issue. We have to get closer to Vision Zero. Our goals, our targets for Vision Zero have pretty much stayed the same. They haven't gotten any better. Good thing they haven't gotten any worse, but we need to focus more on areas that are areas where we know there are a lot of issues, like along Rainier. And that includes looking at the built environment. Do we need more lighting? Do we need more speed bumps, crosswalks, lights, basically? And that will definitely come from community. Thank you.
All right, next we will go to Sanatina Sanchez.
Transportation very much is my issue. I have been working with bike advocacy, transit advocacy, pedestrian advocacy, basically my entire life. I was raised by a woman who is basically functionally illiterate, which means she's a lifelong non-driver. I used to walk from the Yesler Terrace apartment down to the free ride zone, back when we had the free ride zone, and then we would get off a few blocks from it in the north end and walk to the Seattle Center. And so I have very lifelong lived experience being a transit rider and a pedestrian and a bike rider in this city. And in all my entire life, I have seen us go from having the second best metro bus system in the country to being one of the weaker ones in terms of reliability and people actually feeling like the bus is a viable option for their daily commute and their daily life. And so what I've been doing is meeting with people in Sound Transit, in the Port of Seattle, in Seattle Department of Transportation, in Washington Department of Transportation, my whole life with by myself as a community activist with Capitol Hill Community Council, and most recently with the Transit Riders Union. And so this is one of the issues that I know that we can make lots of progress on. And it really is about the elected officials working with the people in our government who are promoting more walkable communities and us putting the resources behind the people who are advancing our climate goals and our Vision Zero goals. So that's what I would be doing were I on council. Thanks.
All right, thank you. And finally, Alexis.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, as somebody who doesn't own a car, I am personally aware of the challenges we face as a city as we're looking at providing carbon-free and car-free mobility options. So really looking at how we can meet our climate goals and improve safety and mobility no matter how you get around in the city. And I'm fully committed to a safe, multimodal transportation system that works for everyone. And I know from my own experiences as somebody who doesn't own a car, who's had to take 4 buses to get down to work, and has absolutely experienced things like knowing that the late 8, as we say, is a phenomenon that many bus riders may be familiar with. I am committed to increasing our bus transit services, as well as looking at how we can continue the investments and expand upon them as in the proposed Move Seattle levy. So looking at how we can also improve safety and connectivity with thoughtful street redesign, pedestrian lighting, protected bike lanes, and transit stop safety and repairs, while also centering people when we're navigating a city. And so we can build an integrated local system that prioritizes walking, rolling, biking, and public transit. I'm really committed to finding ways we can create more horizontal transportation across the city, so that east-west corridor branching off from Sound Transit, our light rail stations, while then also looking at how we can support equitable transit-oriented development to really connect housing to transportation options. Further, I support and would look forward to working with state and local partners as we're looking at expanding our EV charging network, again, working on being able to further electrify our system and buses. And lastly, would say that we need to explore progressive revenue options to fund our changes to public transit to really align with community priorities for safety, mobility, maintenance, and livability, as have been expressed by an amazing coalition from the Urbanist, from Disability Rights Washington, and from Transit Riders Union as they put forward community priorities for the transportation levy. And I look forward to finding opportunities to expand and fund those.
And you are at time. All right. Now we'll be moving on to the second question, which is on the topic of housing. So this question is, what are your plans to utilize and incentivize the $1 billion housing levy, excluding the proposed I-137 payroll revenue funds, to increase affordable housing in the city, especially for middle and low-income families in the face of rapid development? And for this question, we're going to go ahead and start with Sanatina Sanchez. You have 2 minutes. I think you're
Thank
muted.
you. Sorry, apologies for that. I believe that we need to be especially investing in upzoning all of the districts in our city. 6 floors in a corner store is a cry from the urbanist perspective. And that's one of the things that we really need to focus on, is how do we create communities in each neighborhood where people are able to live on a day-to-day basis without needing to drive to the grocery store, where there are ample activities for kids, for elders, for adults to live in their neighborhood. And how can we connect these centers with each other through transit? And so that's one of the things that I've been trying to focus on, is how do we make really focused, livable communities? How do we come to each neighborhood and say, what are the needs of your particular community? And how can we help you develop in a way that is good for the community? We can't say that people are allowed to step out of the limits of our state. We know that our state has given us a plan for growth, and we need to meet and exceed those plans, knowing that people are going to want to live in our city. And so we need to invest in creating up zones. We need to invest in creating transit-oriented communities where people are able to live on a day-to-day basis, and put our resources more into the social services that support those communities, and so that we can actually have people who are supported through their lives and are able to make better choices for our communities.
All right, thank you. Now we'll pop it over to Tarek.
Thanks. I think the way that we need to focus on developing housing needs to fundamentally figure out how can we build thriving centers for these different communities. One of my favorite visions of this came from, I cannot remember, the UW public health professor that gave a talk a few years ago at TEDx UW that showed how do we build a holistic vision where we can have people from all walks of life, all social classes, thriving in the same place. How do we use this to address food deserts? How do we use this to address access to transportation? How do we address this with respect to climate emergencies and the need for more cooling centers and clean air centers? And so I think as we're starting to build out public housing through this developer, we have to work with those communities. I'm a big fan of partnering with trusted organizations that have had a hold in those different parts of the city for a long time, to ensure that we can keep the people who have lived there their whole lives there, and also build room for the more people that are coming in. I think one of the big indicators that we can look at for this is the fact that currently about 90% of Seattle residents are white collar, meaning that a lot of our critical blue collar workers have to commute from far outside the city. My own brother, who works as a imam and chaplain in South Seattle, commutes every day from Arlington. That is unsustainable. It's frankly absurd to be able to have to serve that community but not be able to live and breathe and exist within those spaces. So I think we need to take that holistic approach and figure out how do we build fundamentally connected and resilient communities by partnering with everyone around us and creating places for individuals of all classes and for small businesses.
Thank you. Now we will go to Alexis.
Thank you. Well, as somebody that's spent their career working in affordable housing development and homelessness, I would state at the top that the housing levy is going to do a lot of exciting things for our community, and namely 3 areas. The first being like a stated goal to create over 3,000 new affordable homes. Then secondly, stabilizing our supportive housing workforce, and then also working on homelessness prevention and ensuring housing stability. And so as we look at bringing online over 3,000 new affordable homes to our community, as a council, we can take steps to be able to make it easier to develop that housing. And that involves zoning changes to our communities, so allowing for increased density and making it easier for us to develop by allowing for incentives. I mean, overall, creating more opportunities to bring online those homes more quickly. Further, we can do work to ensure that where we are bringing on our housing is done so equitably. And so working alongside community and looking at how we can further connect our housing to transit and really leaning into transit-oriented development options. I support looking at how we really work on community-based development. with explicit goals to stop displacement of low-income communities and our communities of color. And so while also with a clear eye towards increasing density across the city and again, transit-oriented development. We can work on expanding strategies to help people maintain their housing as well, from just the act of also preventing homelessness, providing emergency rental assistance, utility shut-off assistance, and so on. So with that, I'll end there.
Great, thank you. And then finally, Councilmember Wu.
Yeah, so I went to every single comprehensive plan meeting, and I'm hearing the same thing. Everybody says we need to build more housing. This plan needs to be more ambitious. We need to do more to be able to meet our goals. And so, making sure that Seattle's in line with HB 1110, as well as, being allowed to build where transit will be going into, especially with ST3 coming online in a couple of years. This is a 20-year plan. And, as an affordable housing developer and provider, redeveloping the Louisa Hotel into workforce affordable apartments costs 3 times more in a historic building than a built new. And so I think there are many things we can look at. One thing is, how do we fast track permits for affordable housing? Permits take anywhere from 2 to 6 years. And so the state auditor or the city auditor has looked at things that SDCI can do to help make that a little bit quicker. We also need to look at things like making sure communities of color have access to resources to be able to build. And that includes we have low-income housing tax credits. We have, affordable housing groups have something called buy up, where they will purchase and pay the difference between building a single resident to a family resident apartment, making sure that these programs are known to people who are building. There's also, resources we need to look at, like MHA, eliminating that fee in lieu of and making people build that affordable housing. We need to re-examine MFTE. And I'm also working on legislation that will do that for next year, where we offer an incentive. If you look around, we're not building housing anymore. There's been a stall. So how do we jumpstart that housing? And that's something, using my developer experience, I'm putting together some legislation that I'm hoping will come about at the end of the year.
Thank you. And now we're going to pass it over to Evan to read the next couple of questions.
Awesome. All right. I will put these in the chat for you all as well. But we'll get started. Given the spike in violent crimes, especially here in the U District in the last couple of years, how do you plan to work collaboratively with law enforcement, community organizations, and residents around the university, as well as the rest of the city, to ensure the safety of students and other residents in the area? Tariq, it looks like we're going to be starting with you, if you are ready.
Yeah, and I think this is a very good question. I mean, I went to the UW as an undergrad. I went there for my master's in jurisprudence, so I'm familiar with how things have kind of changed and adjusted in that district over time. I think one of the things that's really missing from our public safety plan is a fundamentally treating them as social and public health crises. Just like many other cities in the nation, we're dealing with an opioid crisis and fentanyl crisis, and we have to start treating them like the social problems they are. That includes building safe injection sites. That includes expanding a core of social workers that can help work with these people to figure out, you're in this situation now. How do we get you to a better place 6 months from now? How do we connect you with different resources and opportunities that can help you thrive as a person? And I think there's a lot of work that's needed to reallocate funding from the existing agencies that we have. Most of all, I think we need to reallocate a lot of funding from Seattle Police. Having a comprehensive solution, having one agency that's responsible for addressing any kind of issue, from a mental health crisis to a drug overdose, fundamentally isn't really sustainable. And it's not fair for one agency to deal with all of that. So I think we need to look at the resources that we're spending and find ways to build comprehensive human-based solutions to the big problems that we're having in the U District and throughout the rest of the city.
Awesome. Thank you. We will move on to you, Alexis, next.
Well, coming from a family that's been impacted by incarceration, as well as having close experiences in my family with those who are experiencing substance use disorder, I really feel as though at times the polarization of public safety doesn't address the real concerns of residents across the city. And so we need to take steps to follow data and our values. And so as a city, we need to find a way and fully clarify the scope and right size our law enforcement, first responder staffing, and really center culturally competent engagement, police accountability, and community investments that truly improve our safety as a broader community. So I'm focused on working on the grassroots, city, and state level to work on keeping guns out of hands of youth and individuals at risk of harming themselves or their loved ones, and working on common sense gun safety. I'm also focused on how we can evaluate current investments into public safety to ensure that our funding is being utilized in the most effective way and actually supporting community wellness and safety, while innovating and looking at how we can introduce newer models that support crime intervention, prevention, and community wellness. We can continue our investments and expand our investments into programs such as LEAD, which is known as Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion, Community Passageways. These are programs that help restore lives and prevent violence and the cycles of incarceration and generational harm that I know I've experienced deeply in my life. And we can work on investing in dual dispatch programs like the CARE team and create a broader strategy around alternative response. And lastly, I would say we need to take steps to address the overdose epidemic, increase access to community-based treatment, and support our partners as we grow our behavioral health workforce and ensure that overdose reversal medication and fentanyl testing is expansive. And last but not least, working alongside and centering the voices of communities that have been disproportionately impacted by racist police practices is critically important as we go about creating a safer community.
Awesome, right on time. Tanya, we'll hear from you next.
Yeah, so as I stated before, I have served for 4 years on my community watch group. We are out there, we're at 12th and Jackson, we see what's happening, we go into encampments, and what our main focus is building trust and trying to build community. I think that's what's missing in our outreach. I'm working on something similar to Community Watch. We're trying to roll out to the entire city, having neighborhood de-escalation teams, allowing volunteers in neighborhoods to basically talk to one another, to communicate, and to help those who are part of that community who are there and try to connect people to resources. And so I know the U District Partnership has a program where they have safety ambassadors, people who work with LEAD and REACH, and I believe We Deliver Care does some work for them as well, where they are talking to people, they're on the streets, they're reaching out, and I know they're trying to expand their program. What's happening on 3rd Avenue with LEAD, REACH, We Deliver Care, I believe it's working, but the problem that's not working is that the people who are on 3rd, Pike and Pine are also the same people who go to 12th and Jackson. They just go back and forth. And it's inequitable that only one street has resources while others don't. And so I know there are many other districts who also want a similar plan where diversion as well as wraparound services and housing and getting to the root cause of why people are outside is really important. And so I'm advocating for more programs that include LEAD, REACH, We Deliver Care, and making sure or advocating for that in the budget. I know that's also a big issue in terms of sustaining resources because LEAD is at capacity. They can't accept any more clients. And so how do we work together with our groups to be able to allow for more of those resources?
Awesome. All right, and we will hear from you as well now, Sanatina.
Yes, I believe that the response to this is about listening to the communities that are already collaborating together. We have organizations like Community Passageways and Not One More who are in our communities, who are liaising with police officers, and what we're hearing from officers and what I base a lot of my public safety policy on is listening to police officers who tell us they should not be doing so many of the jobs they're doing. When I elevate these concerns, neighbors and say that makes sense. I want to get more of our resources in terms of diversion, in terms of outreach services into our social services division so that we have a more comprehensive wraparound services. I spent about every single day through January and into February at a shelter on Nagel after the Black Lives Memorial Garden was destroyed. Our city spent hundreds and thousands of dollars of resources on destroying a community center where neighbors had gotten together and were supporting people and had gotten people into housing because caseworkers would find them at this one location, all under the threat of constant evictions of this encampment. Sweeping people from street to street, as Councilmember Wu said, doesn't work. We need to actually support the people who are currently unhoused on our streets. And we need to make sure that neighbors understand that a little bit of garbage can be solved if we put money into sanitation services instead of carceral services. And so that's my focus, is how do we focus on the actual issues that people are concerned about, and how do we put our resources, our public funding, money, taxes into those services rather than trying to punish people when they're at their lowest.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll get into our next question. So the city of Houston, Texas reduced homelessness by 65% last year by placing all affordable housing associations, PDAs, and social support services under one umbrella of governance. What can and will you do to incentivize cross-collaboration amongst all housing organizations and support services to ensure fiscal accountability within the city and effective action when it comes to reducing homelessness? Alexis, we will start with you.
Right. Well, as the only person on this panel that has worked across all of our homelessness service providers professionally and has worked on trying to fully unite and create a unified system, I am fully aware of the challenges that are currently facing our system and the work that needs to be done in order to create a unified kind of network across services. And so that work is best exemplified actually in the work of the 5-year plan, where I worked with over 1,000 community members representing service provider organizations, 39 cities, and with our unhoused neighbors to develop that plan. We need a lot of work to actually also bring other system partners to the table. And when I say system partners, I'm talking about our foster care system, behavioral health system, healthcare system. All of these issues are interconnected, and we need an all-hands-on approach to fully address homelessness. And further, I also fully recognize that in this moment, our current coordinating entity designated to address homelessness is facing a number of operational challenges. I know that very deeply given my work at the agency, but there are a few truths here. The fact that we also need a major investment into addressing homelessness. Homelessness is a crisis, and our community is not investing the scale of resources needed to respond to the crisis. That is one truth. And the other truth is the current place designated to being where we respond to the homelessness crisis is in need of accountability, and it is facing operational challenges. And I'm ready to do the work across partners to not only implement the 5-year plan, but also call for accountability and make sure that we set the King County Regional Homelessness Authority on track for success with all parties at the table.
Cool. Thank you so much. We will hear from you next, Tanya.
So I've been present when there have been sweeps. I chat with our unhoused neighbors. I've seen people who cycled through the system, who have lost trust, who have found housing but chose to go back on the streets because they miss their friends, their family, that's where their community is. And so I think it's a very complex situation. And I agree, we do need some kind of cross collaboration amongst all our housing organizations, support services. There is a big issue in which people don't have to volunteer information if they don't want to. They don't have to give their name. And so it's very hard to track people without those records. And so I believe these organizations are doing the best that they can. Many of these systems with different organizations, KCRJ is on one system, while another organization is on another system. And you would need a referral to get to a specific shelter, to get into housing, to get to resources. And it's really frustrating for me as a volunteer who interacts with our unhoused residents to help get them resources and support, because they can't share that data with me. I can't make referrals. I could tell people where to go to find shelter. I can call around at night at 5 different shelters to see if there's any room. I go through that quite often, and it's really frustrating. And so I would love to see some kind of cross collaboration, getting these systems together so we know we have one place we can go to know where the shelter is, to if there is a bed available that I could send somebody to, and not only make that available to, organizations, but to volunteers such as myself, which is my group. And, I think how we do that and how we get that accountability is by doing that through the budget, is, being able to ask for transparency from these groups, these organizations. Are they meeting their goals? Are they helping people? Are they housing people? Are these resources available? Are they talking to one another? My building is with Housing Connector. We house 20 formerly unhoused people. And so it's quite interesting to see, like, most people would love to have someone partner with them, a case manager that will follow them throughout their journey. But unfortunately, that's not the case. There is a caseworker that's with you, and then you get passed off to somebody else. When you get to shelter, when you find housing, you get somebody else. And so there's no time to build that trust, to build that continuous journey service. And asking these questions through the budgets, I think is important. Thank you.
I was muted. It's going to be you, Sonatina, next. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am currently on the board for Community Roots Housing, one of Seattle's public development authorities. And I live in one of the Community Roots Housing buildings, and I represent the residents in that seat. I also have been a part of the Seattle Renter Organizing Council for the last 2 years. Actually, since the day it was founded, I was one of the founding members. And we've been working with, before Councilmember Mosqueda left to the county, we worked with her office and Morales' office in order to get a $50,000 budgetary note to establish an office of renting standards. And this is a department that would work much in the way of the Office of Labor Standards, where residents and property managers would be able to have one place to go to be able to discuss all of the issues that are related to housing in our city. These issues are a part of civil rights. Like, if we follow the UN Charter, which the United States called for, which is the housing is a human right, we in Seattle should be working at establishing an office that makes housing a human right a reality. And I think that this is one of those offices that this is designed to do. In the same way, we need to look at the services that are privatized. We know that having somebody with a profit motive running an organization isn't nearly as efficient as having a public agency, which is just about serving our public. And so what I think we should do is we should audit all of the different public service private agencies that are currently contracted and consulting for these services, and see if we can bring them in-house, save money, and create a more better trained workforce to serve all of the residents of our community. We have the resources. We just need to know how to apply them better in the way that we know Seattleites want to apply them and solve the problems of our city. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And we will end this one with you, Tariq.
Yeah, I mean, like my other colleagues on the panel mentioned, we have to look at this through a comprehensive and connected solution. Everybody ends up in homelessness in a very different way and under a different experience. And there's a couple of elements that we have to pay attention to. One, what are the temporary or permanent factors that are keeping them there? And do we have the resources to address those? And how well does it address those questions? The second one is an element of trust. I believe it was a few months ago that the disapproval rate for Seattle City Council and the current administration was about 70% people disapproving. There's a lot of mistrust that is there, and it's going to take a lot of time to build that back. One of the efforts that I'd like to take on as city council member is finding key organizations that we can partner with that have been doing this work on the ground. Like we all mentioned, there's many people and many organizations that have been working on these problems that have made it their life's work to do that. A lot of these can help reach out with particularly vulnerable communities, particularly communities where English is not a first language, particularly communities that are primarily composed of refugees, and can help bridge some of the gap of where it's just hard to reach out to those people and help build a more comprehensive form of advocacy. I think a combination of partnership with community organizations and an audit of the way that we're spending money and making sure it doesn't circulate around just the same few people that always get different city contracts, I think will prove to be an effective way of addressing this issue in a comprehensive and holistic manner.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it over to Vivek now for the last bit of our structured questions.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Evan. So the next question is about climate change. As climate change impacts our city and region more and more, how do you personally and professionally fight climate change, and how do you plan to extend those initiatives into a position within the city council? And we're going to start this question off with Sanatina.
Personally, my commitment to climate change is about driving as little as possible, being a lifelong transit rider and bicyclist and pedestrian. What I also try to do, though, is remind people that the majority of the pollution that is created from cars comes from the source, which is the manufacturing. And that means that an electric vehicle is just as polluting as a gas-powered vehicle. And so we need to redesign our environment, our built infrastructure into spaces where cars are not actually required for 99% of our trips. We know how to do this. We know how to create livable communities. We have examples from all over the world. And we can apply these different examples to the neighborhoods of Seattle in ways that work best for the neighborhood. In my particular community of Capitol Hill, we have been asking for the city to help us implement a project like the Barcelona Mega Block, where we close off a group of small streets around major streets. So we have a car path through the neighborhood that works better for drivers, works better for walkers, and everybody who uses active transportation. In other areas, I was talking to people in Ballard about the maritime industrial districts of Copenhagen and other Scandinavian cities, where they go into the communities and do needs assessment once again and say, what do you as the manufacturer, what do you as a shipping person, what do you as a housing provider, what do you as a person who rents or lives in this neighborhood, or a retail person, what do you need to really function in this neighborhood? And then they come back and they design a plan where everybody's needs come together. So these are the kinds of ideas that I think we need to really go bold on in order to address our climate change, because the more that we can create a place where Seattleites want to live and stay in their neighborhoods and be able to travel outside of their neighborhoods in low carbon modes, that's how we're going to reach our climate goals. Thanks.
Thank you. Next is going to be Tariq.
Yeah, I think one of the things that Sanatina really mentioned on that I think is really critical to remember especially as we talk about climate, is that a lot of the changes that we can make at a climate level fundamentally rely on changes at the institutions that are part of part of the problem. Any of us here, we order takeout and there's a plastic bag, that's one thing. If we have executives that are deciding we're going to use plastic bags in all the stores we have, we're going to deploy a whole fleet of gas cars and not even consider electric. These are the real places where we can make the most impactful change. I'm a member, I'm part of the Seattle Zero Waste group on Facebook. And so I've done a lot of things that I can at an individual level, but at some point it becomes difficult and there's only so much onus we can put on the individual. So we have to look at how can we incentivize greener choices at every stage of the decision. I have a car because I like to drive on the weekends, but my goal is I don't want to have to use a car for any of the normal things that I do. I don't want to have to, I want to have as little plastic. I do a little challenge where I keep our garbage bin as minimal as possible and see how much we can fit into yard waste and recycling. And I think that there's policies that we can set in ordinances that we can implement that really require and enforce these better decisions and put those incentives on where the difference happens most on the businesses that can make those big decisions.
Awesome. Thank you. Next up for this question is going to be Alexis.
Amazing. Well, I think everybody's also spoken to this matter. There's steps that we can take on an individual level, and then there's larger systematic things that are happening that really drive a lot of the impacts that we're seeing on our climate. On a personal level, I choose not to have a car. It's one of the individual choices that I've made to take steps to lead a greener lifestyle and do my part. Is this the moment I mention I'm vegan? Okay, it's out, cat's out the bag. That is a very personal choice that I've made in my life and would never push onto anybody. But I think all that to say, you're hearing from all of us, like we are taking individual life choices as meeting our lifestyles to do our part, but that doesn't solve everything. And so as I'm looking at how we can create true climate resilience in our community. We can look at supporting infrastructure investments while leveraging our state and federal funds to really modernize our existing buildings and push for Seattle's green building standards, which are much higher than across the country. So we should celebrate the fact that our region is taking steps to really create and build greener buildings that are much more friendly and resilient to the climate. We can target our critical projects to increase green spaces, such as our parks, community gardens, and urban forests, especially in historically under-resourced communities, ensuring that all people across our community can have equitable access to gorgeous green spaces. We can work on establishing workforce development initiatives, and then also looking at how we can incorporate anti-displacement strategies to keep people's commutes short, and so we can keep folks connected to communities that they call home. And then lastly, I would elevate that we need to protect Seattle's Green New Deal funding to maintain and accelerate climate action and our sustainability policies and community partnerships citywide.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Last up for this question is going to be Councilwoman Tanya Wu.
I grew up in Beacon Hill. It's a tree desert there. We're surrounded by the I-5 freeway, Boeing Field, downtown, the industrial area. And so it's a fact that people who live in areas where there's not great air have higher impacts of asthma, who live less than people who have access to clean air. And so that kind of just drives me through my life. And how do we, save trees? How do we build at the same time save our trees? We could do both. And most importantly, how do we get closer to being carbon neutral by 2050? So I've attended a bunch of conferences. Just on Monday, chatted with representatives from Lund and Stockholm about what they're doing in their cities to get to climate neutrality. And so looking at those issues, protecting Green New Deal in our budget, and as I chair sustainability and the Seattle City Light Committee, how do we allow for grid resiliency and EV charging and everything that we need to do? How do we make sure that we talk to communities to let them know that there's resources to move from gas to electric? Make sure that we have a lens of equity when it comes to requiring that. Also looking at this summer, we're also going to go look at our building emissions program and do the rulemaking for that. And especially looking at, are we meeting our 2050 goal for climate neutrality, as well as for tree canopy, which is at 30% tree canopy. We're not there yet. And so how do we move closer to our goals by figuring out where we're at, what we've been doing, is it working, before moving forward? And so another thing that I am hoping to do this summer, we don't have very much time, is look at our tree ordinance and be able to fix that, as well as how do we allow for more green spaces for our communities? How do we make sure that we have an equity lens when it comes to climate resiliency hubs, in terms of how we try to make that switch from gas to electric, not only in our neighborhoods, but in our commercial areas, and looking at BEP's building emissions program going forward to try to get us close to our goals.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. So the last of our pre-written questions is about collaboration and communication between the city council, mayor's office, and other stakeholders, because this is essential for effective governance. So how will you work to build consensus foster transparency, and engage with constituents to address their needs and concerns, and ensure accountability in city government. And we're going to start this question off with Tariq.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of room that can be there's a lot of room for improvement in terms of keeping connection between constituents, between the different stakeholders. I'll start with stakeholders. I think the role of leadership and administration in the city is to look at the 10,000-foot view and help to see when we're looking at the holistic picture of someone's life experience here, whether they are a renter, whether they're an owner, whether they're a business, whether they're a business owner, whether they're just someone who moved here 3, 4, 5 months ago, how is the city serving each of those different parts of the each of those people? And I think that part of the job is to be able to negotiate and work well with each of these different groups and ensure that we are creating incentives within the structures of the city to really drive forth better solutions that that we can measure and show meaningful improvement on a day-to-day and a month-by-month basis. Part of this is also going to be collaborating with stakeholders of the county and the state. There's a lot of changes that are going to require us to work with other cities in the region and to lobby for state funding. And I think that's a very powerful tool that we have. In terms of constituent outreach, I want to see more opportunities for alternative forms of engagement. I think during the pandemic, we had a lot of really great opportunities for engaging virtually with elected officials. And I'd like to see more opportunities that help lower the bar to entry so that we don't necessarily need to know all the different technical terms or ordinances or state or federal laws that affect our lives on a day-to-day basis. We should be able to explain it so that we can truly lower the bar so that anybody can participate in making their city and their neighborhood better.
Thank you. Next up for this question is Councilwoman Wu.
I think it's a very exciting time to be on the council. We are all in person. We're in office 5 days a week. We continuously chat about ideas and build those relationships to foster transparency, as well as sharing information, which I think is very important. The council position 8 is a really unique role in that you are a citywide council member, whereas there are 7 districts. And so really leaning in and supporting the district council members and working collaboratively and how we get to support one another is very important, and making sure that we're just checking in, because sometimes people would just email us, and we want to make sure that, you don't want to step on any toes, and working with the district council member to how do we address different constituents respectfully. I believe, in one of the things I'm most interested in is how do we reach communities furthest away from government? How do we reach immigrants, refugees, people who don't speak English? And if nothing is more evident in that divide than when community members come into chambers and are not able to get a translator. Just a month ago, we had someone who needed ASL translation. City was not able to find anybody, and that person was not able to speak. Many times, I'm sure many of you know, and have been there with me, we've gone to council chambers with seniors who have no idea what the government process looks like. They have left their country because they were being persecuted. And so how do you develop that trust in government to be able to allow them to be involved more in the government process? And that starts with translation. And so translation only works one way towards the council members. It does not work both ways. So people who are in chambers who don't have that translation services are not aware of what's happening. So that's something I am looking into, and how do we allow for someone who comes into chambers to be able to understand and learn about what's going on. Then after that, how do we reach out to communities furthest away from government to get them more involved in the government process, let them know what resources are available. I was at the Public Safety Forum last week, and someone from South Seattle who runs a organization for 40 kids came up to me and was like, we had no idea that the city had high school internship programs. How do we get this information so our kids can get more involved in government? And I'm surprised that this is still the case nowadays. But how do we don't want to wait for people to
Awesome.
come to us.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm sorry. That's time. Up next. Sorry. Up next is going to be Sonatina.
Accountability in government is the job of government, in my opinion. We need to make sure that as a council member, we have a regular contact with our constituents. And for me, that means having regular office hours in the neighborhood centers, in community centers, having a contact in the office where there's a regular presence, that somebody that neighbors can get to know and be able to have a consistent voice, a consistent face that they can connect with. We know that sometimes it takes people a little while to be able to learn how to communicate with each other. And so having a consistent meeting on the books with a neighbor representative from the office will be a game changer for many people. This also allows people to request different times that are better for a person to meet with a government official. We know that a lot of our business takes place when most people are working or when people are at home and needing to take care of children. So I think that we need to be a lot more open about how people are able to engage with our representatives, having regular town halls on the books scheduled and making sure that there is a consistent presence, not just by the office staff, but by the council member, me, going and meeting with people all throughout the year. I think we have a great system in Seattle as well in terms of having reports on our drinking water quality. We do assessments and send out reports already through various agencies. And so I think that modeling this and having a comprehensive space where we tell people where there are these reports and we have a requirement of our different agencies to create these kinds of reports is the next step in having really good accountability in our government systems. I believe that everybody should be able to engage and that we need to have more disability services represented in our system. And so that is one of the major things that I will be working on in increasing the disability access. Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Last up for this question is going to be Alexis.
So this question is exactly why I want to go forward and serve on Seattle City Council. I'm a big believer in nothing about us without us, and I've practiced this in every role that I've had working for the betterment of our communities. From being a community organizer and being on the front lines of really organizing around rallies, protests, being with communities when they are crying for accountability from their government, and holding that space and uplifting voices and doing the hard work of also navigating all of the dynamics tied in with that body of work is something that has carried me throughout my public service, my career in public service. And I've brought that spirit when I've worked on the King County Regional Homelessness Authority's 5-year plan, where I led the development and also the robust community engagement process that took place over 6 months, where we reached over 1,000 community members, ran 40 workshops, including and centering the voices of those with lived experience. We rolled out the plan to the streets. I've walked through and talked to our unhoused neighbors about how we actually plan for a system that serves them and gets them housed. And in the work in all of those workshops, we took the approach to understand that there is such a spectrum of homelessness and so many different communities are impacted by homelessness. And so having worked alongside our unhoused neighbors who have had experiences with gender-based violence and understanding how we can do work to better serve them in our system is something that I've done. Understanding the intersections with our criminal justice system is something that I've done. But I would close with this piece in saying that I've done the work across my public service career of building consensus, whether it be around a unanimously approved 5-year plan or doing the work to cultivate a agreement between 5 North King County cities to actually regionalize our response to homelessness, and would close by saying just how critically important it is that when community is crying for accountability, as our community did in 2020 for police accountability, and we take a vote on a contract that dishonors that, that is not how we honor community voice and act in good faith and what we've been tasked to do. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Next up is going to be Evan introducing the next section.
Awesome. Thank you. So we'll get into our audience questions now. We have done our best to go through these and pick those that were asked most often since there was a lot of overlap and we are a little bit short on time. But essentially, each candidate will have a minute and a half this time to answer each question, and each of you will be asked a question first. Time papers will be used again. We will hold up the yellow paper when you're halfway through and hit the 4 to 5 second mark, and the red paper when you have 15 seconds and should wrap it up. These are going to be fairly quick as well, and we understand that there's definitely more than a minute and a half of content to answer, but again, please do try and keep it to time. I will pass it over to Vivek for our first question.
Yeah, so the first question is, what are your ideas for transferring more money to public services and emergency responders as alternatives to policing? And first up for this question is going to be Alexis.
Sorry, are you putting the question in the chat? Okay, thank you. Absolutely. I think to this degree, it's critical to talk about this moment that we are in as a city facing a massive budget deficit. It cannot be emphasized enough. I think recent estimates have us upwards of $240 million. And without taking steps to implement a new progressive revenue option, that will just result in cuts to critical community services such as alternative responses. And so I stand firmly in this to say that we need more progressive revenue options in order to fund these services. And I would be prioritizing the maintenance and expansion of programs that are alternatives to policing.
Awesome, thank you. Next up for this question is Tanya.
So I run a alternatives to policing group, and we don't take any public funds. And I've been doing it for 4 years. But I believe we need to I mean, this is a larger question that's a little bit complicated. Like, how do we expand the care team? It's not money that's the issue. It's restrictions regarding unions. And then looking at how emergency responders work, and those contracts are through HSD, the Human Services Department. And, you know, a lot of our contracts go through KCRJ, and this year KCRJ is up for renewal. And so how do we, you know, not only for HSD, for all of our city departments, really look at what is working, what is not working, and put money to areas that have shown results as part of the accountability process, as part of the transparency process. How do we, you know, there's going to be a lot of things that's on the table that might be cut. It's a budget year and we have a huge deficit and we're going to make unfortunate decisions. But I prioritize diversion, I prioritize public safety, I prioritize alternatives to policing, such as what my group does, and we'll fight for those buckets in the budget. But, you know, looking at the entire budget, we really have to look at what's working and put money there.
Thank you. Next up for this question is Sanatina.
We need to transfer agencies or services such as parking enforcement out of the SPD. And I know that that was something that was tried and failed in the wake of the 2020 uprising. And it wasn't, unfortunately, seriously tried because we didn't do the work it takes to change the reasons that we have parking enforcement, which is to change, again, our built infrastructure. When we look at the officers telling us, again, they don't want to respond to the crisis situations that people are in sometimes. We want to take money away from officers with guns showing up and put it into care workers who want to show up for their community. So we look at the people who are doing the jobs and we listen to people who want to do the jobs without guns attached to their hips and say, how can we fund these programs more effectively? How can we say that the parking enforcement should be street design inspection? When somebody's parked in a spot, that shouldn't maybe get a ticket, they should get a report back to SDOT and say, how can we change the street infrastructure so that nobody can get a ticket in this way again? These are the kinds of long-term infrastructure things that we need to look at if we're actually going to be serious about changing our society into a place where a person with a gun isn't needed to show up for most circumstances. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Up next is Tarek.
Yeah, I think one of the really big things is, again, the big thing with redirecting responses is figuring out what are the cases when people need to call 911 or need some response, and what is actually needed there. I think fundamentally it doesn't make sense to rely solely on community here. I have a saying that if you rely on heroes, your approach is fundamentally unsustainable. So while volunteers and community organizations are super important, we need to provide a more in-depth funding structure for alternative responses. Right now, I think that all the money that's being put into SPD is not necessarily as effective. We are doing more than 3 homeless sweeps a day at the peak of homeless sweeps. It's more money to keep someone in a prison cell than it is to take a night at the Ritz-Carlton. And that's a lot of inefficiency, and there's a way better ways that we can use that funding. So I think that while we do need alternative alternative options for progressive revenue, I think that there is a lot to be said in where we can redirect a lot of the funding from law enforcement into much more humane, community-centered responses.
Thank you. All right, we'll now be moving into the next audience question, which I will be reading. So that question is, what is your plan to address the city's expected $250 million budget deficit that's expected for next year? So we're going to start off with Tanya.
Yes, I believe the mayor's response to that is, start all the budgets from the ground up, not just carrying the budgets over from last year. I think everything is on the table this year. And the select budget committee is meeting tomorrow, but we are examining how we got here in the first place. And that's looking at, what we have been spending on one-time spending when, we didn't have huge inflation rates. And so trying to figure out how we got here, I think is really important. And what will we need for the future? What are our priorities? And so, public safety, having services is a priority. And we talk about the Progressive Revenue Task Force a lot, and there were several findings, and they found that only 2 were illegal, and those 2 that are things that we're doing right now. And so, how do we really examine what when it comes to accountability and transparency, what our different government programs are doing right now, and are they showing results? Are they effective? It's like I said earlier, it's going to be a lot of hard decisions, but we will have to look at priorities and look at what's results and what's works, because we want to make sure that you as taxpayers are getting a return on your investment.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Sanatina.
We need progressive revenue. That's hands down this answer to this question. We have the most regressive tax structure in the country, and we rely on pretty much all of our funding from sales tax, from property tax, and taxing. And what we really need to look at is who is benefiting the most from our society. We need to look at profits from businesses and see how they are using our resources and what they can contribute back into society that has given them so much. That's what we need to really look at. Wealth taxes and capital gains are 2 other things that we need to look at, because we need to see who, again, is working the system in order to avoid paying their fair share in benefiting from the society that we are all sharing. We have people who live in very high resource neighborhoods who contribute very little back into the tax structure, and we have people living in very low resourced areas who contribute the most into our tax revenue. And so this is the fundamental problem of our city, and it is up to us as city council, as the administration, to say, no, we are going to fight for the people who have the least in order for them to be able to have a good life and be able to have more of their money in their pocket at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we are going to go to Tarek.
Yeah, I think fundamentally, progressive revenue and better revenue solutions, like Sanatia said, relies on the institutions that benefit need to pay up. I want to see more expansion of things like the Jumpstart tax. And I think there's also a lot of work that we need to look at within the city of, are we actually using every dollar as effectively. One of the really big things I'm interested in is looking at contract reform for the city. There's a lot of the same people to have the same contracts, and they're not, a lot of them are not even benefiting our community directly. So one thing I would like to look at is see, are we impacting historically low resource communities? Are we able to keep that money that are from the taxpayers within the city? And that's going to fundamentally build a much more sustainable long-term environment, both at every level, from the individual taxpayer who's going to see that benefit, and also, again, we need to view this as an institutional problem, not an individual problem. That is one of the fundamental issues that we have in the way that our tax system is structured. And so we're looking at new options here. We have to be, one, responsible with the monies that we're using, and two, make sure that the institutions that are benefiting are actually paying their fair share for all of the benefits they're getting from being in the city.
Thank you. And finally, we'll go to Alexis.
Thank you. And I would echo a lot of the sentiments that some of my colleagues have stated and said that we need to right-size our budget to meet the needs of our growing community. And due to our regressive tax structures, the growth of industry, employment, and business, this is not translated into a revenue base that can support the needs of our community, growing communities. Councilmember Wu mentioned the programs that were stood up with one-time money, and that is true. We received money from the American Rescue Plan. These dollars we might refer to as COVID money. And our city stood up and deployed those resources and stood up programs to save lives and support our community throughout the pandemic. The fact of the matter is the needs have remained. The needs have grown as we're continuing to weather the outcomes of the pandemic in our community. I support expanding our options for progressive revenue to meet those needs that remain. We need to explore additional revenue options, including a local capital gains tax, a high payroll tax, a real estate transfer tax that can generate revenue to fund our programs to address our most critical issues. And I support working with Seattle State Delegation to explore how the legislature can create more revenue options for municipalities.
Thank you. And now we'll pass it on to Evan for the next audience question.
Awesome. Thank you so much. There we go. All right. So this is going to be our last audience question tonight, just in the interest of time and allowing our candidates a chance for closing statements as well. We encourage you all to head over to their websites and any other forums this election season to get answers to all of your questions. But for us, do you think the comprehensive plan is sufficient to meet Seattle's housing needs? And if not, what would you include to reach those needs? And we will start with you, Sanatina.
I'm good. I think that when you have organizations diverse, such as Cascade Bike Club, the Seattle Chamber of Commerce, 350 Seattle, and Beacon Development Group asking the mayor to go harder, go bigger, we need a better solution in terms of our housing plan. We need to allow more housing options in every single neighborhood in the city. And if we don't, we're setting ourselves up for a higher rental prices, for more inequality, and a continuation of the segregation put in place during the urban renewal eras of the 60s and 70s. We should not be planning for a bare minimum of people moving to Seattle. We know people are going to want to move here because we are trying to create a city where people want to live. And so we need to plan for that city. We should plan for success. We should plan for the world-class city that we hear our administration wants to present. They are giving us a veneer to show off to the world instead of actually listening to Seattleites and saying, how do you want to live in this city? How will you feel comfortable boasting about the pleasure of living in our city to people from around the world? That's the only way we're going to actually be a world-class city. And we need to be more serious about our comprehensive plan and about the demands that the state is giving us as the largest municipality in the state. We have a role to play in our housing crisis, and we need to step up and play it.
Thank you. All right, we will hear from Tarek next.
Yeah, building off what Sanatina said, we're not building just housing, we are building communities. We are building places for the new people that are coming here and for the people who have been here for decades. And fundamentally, I think that is what is missing is we need to figure out how are we going to build housing that is not just a bunch of overpriced apartments that are just going to line the pockets of corporate landlords. We need to find options that help maintain the presence of critical community organizations, like one I grew up with, the Chime refugee community in South Seattle, who is currently struggling to find a way to preserve their communities within the Othello area and Columbia City area. And so housing is one part of that picture. We need to view this if we're going to call this a comp plan, we need a comprehensive solution. We need to look at the people that are in these communities, what makes these communities vibrant, why we have so many micro cities within this great city of ours, and figure out how are we going to preserve all of the beauty that comes from that and not just another option for giving someone more opportunity to make money off of Seattleites.
Awesome, right on time. Thank you so much. We will hear from Alexis next.
Amazing. I imagine we're all in agreement on a lot of these pieces. We need a more ambitious, comprehensive plan, especially to fully meet the needs of our growing community. Because our community is growing and we can expect to see a lot more folks come to this region, not only because it is a world-class city, as we say, but also because the realities of climate change, our region is absolutely going to see an increase of climate refugees. And so being able to have a plan that adequately accommodates for the amount of growth that is needed is critical. And this means allowing for more types of housing, middle housing to be built in every neighborhood across our city, creating meaningful transit-oriented development, and also creating meaningful anti-displacement strategies that focus on intergenerational wealth building opportunities. And I'd uplift that, I know we have the 37th LD on the line, and we were up late last night talking about a resolution related to the comprehensive plan, where it was really critically uplifted how the 37th LD, as one of the most diverse districts in the state, has experienced tremendous gentrification and displacement through the years. And so as we look at a comprehensive plan that, as it stands, seems to perpetuate more of the same, which is the status quo, which is displacement, it is a critical need that we raise our voices and say that we need to develop more housing across the city and in other neighborhoods and bring on more density across the city.
Thank you. All right, and we will finish out that with Tanya.
As I said before, I've been to every single comprehensive plan meeting, listening to people what their thoughts are. And like everyone has said, we need to build more housing. And the comprehensive plan open commenting periods is still going on. They extended to May 20th. So you still have time to get your thoughts in. So the mayor will release his plan at the end of the year. And that's when it hits city council. And so I'm already working on legislation to ensure that that housing will be there. If it's not going to be in the comprehensive plan, then I will be ready to propose amendments or propose additional legislation to make sure that happens. I've heard some amazing ideas in community. Some people have told me, we want more neighborhood centers. We want all of them. We want, to take this plan and raise it by 30%. And so, but we also want to save trees. And gentrification displacement, while not understood by a lot of communities, people really realize that that's really important. And so if you've read the gentrification displacement plan, please comment on it. We need it to stay. We need to make sure that it becomes more robust. So I hope that you will send in your comments. And I think, regardless of what happens, we're all going to be working together to make sure that we're going to be able to build more housing.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So that was our last audience question for tonight, but I would love to give you guys the opportunity to make a quick closing statement. Those are going to be a minute each, and we will start with Tanya, I believe.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for all the hard work of putting together this forum. My community work on the streets of the Chinatown International District has given me firsthand knowledge of the problems that the entire city of Seattle is facing. I kind of consider the CID a microcosm of what's happening. I believe my multifaceted background, which includes building affordable housing, providing affordable housing, running an alternative to policing group and mutual aid volunteer group, as well as running a legacy small business, my rich community involvement, my fight against racial discrimination, and unwavering dedication to the city uniquely positions me for this role. I am working hard to collaborate and empower communities to create a thriving city. It's taken us a while to get to where we're at now. It's going to take us a while to get to how we want to envision our neighborhoods. So this commitment to community engagement aligns with my broader dedication to social justice. I've been out there doing the work night after night. Despite everything, I'm still walking at night and invite you to come join me. There is a lot of work to do here and in the rest of Seattle to tell our story and to make the case for our place at the table. And I can't do it without you. And so I am asking for your support. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, we will let Tarek take it away next.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody here. I know coordinating something like this, especially with getting last minute changes and still making sure we can get everything is a lot of work. And so thank you to all to the organizers. Thank everyone for attending or who's watching this later. I just wanted to also add in that something I think that is really important about this position as you move forward to the primaries, as you start putting those democracy vouchers in. Remember that this position is supposed to represent the entire city. For myself, I grew up in South Seattle and I currently live in Fremont. And whoever takes this position needs to be able to take that comprehensive view of how city policies are going to affect everybody. So I want to thank everybody again. I also would like to encourage, if you liked anybody that you heard here, go to their website, sign up so they can get democracy vouchers. I believe all of us are still trying to qualify. And whatever happens, I believe that we have the people here in this room to lift the tide for everybody and create a city that's really genuinely built for everybody.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we will go to Sonatina next.
Having grown up in Seattle, I have been just another regular resident working for the city for the last 20 years in various aspects in nonprofits and volunteering, active community member in my neighborhood. I sat on the design review guidelines update of Capitol Hill in 2017. And so I have a deep knowledge of the systems of our city. I've, as I said earlier, had many meetings with city employees over the years on various plans that we've had. And I am ready to take the private experience that I've had as somebody who has been frustrated with our constant requests for opinions and go into city government and try and get those implemented into actual plans that we can be proud of. And so I really look forward to being able to earn your vote and represent the city that I grew up going to school from John Rogers in the north all the way down to Columbia City in the south. And thank you so much for your time here tonight.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we will close out tonight with Alexis.
Thank you. And just to echo again, thank you for moving this to a virtual platform so we can stand by our unionized folks at UAW. So thank you again. So with that, there's so much at stake in this moment. This election is about how we plan for the future. It's about our ability to address the housing crisis and truly make our communities safe. How we can act locally to address climate change and truly keeping all of our services online. The budget crisis is real, and it will be felt by this community if we do not take action to implement a progressive revenue source and start building our coalition to address that. I also know in this, I have the experience having worked across 39 cities and over 100 different organizations and built consensus between all of those. which requires a lot of hard conversations without a doubt, but I've done that work and have a unanimous vote record in my favor, in my back pocket to prove it. And so I am just really excited by the momentum that my campaign has had, with over $100,000 raised and endorsements from key progressive leaders, including Councilmember Tammy Morales and State Representative Julia Reed. I'm grateful for all of the support and ready to deliver on progressive policy at City Council.
Thank you so much. So that is going to be everything that we have for you all tonight. A big thank you to our candidates, Alexis, Sonatina, Tarek, and Tanya, for being here tonight to speak and tell us more about their platforms. I would also love to give a special thank you to Lisa Rivera, Mary Scanlon, Hunter Brown, Rye Armstrong, and Sophia Lee for all of your help in working with YDUW to put together tonight. It would not have been possible without you guys. If any of you want to get in touch with YDUW, I will leave our socials and our email in the chat, so please do not hesitate to reach out for anything. I would also love to invite our candidates here to drop their website and links to any other campaign literature in the chat as well, so that you all can go see those. I will stick around and keep the meeting open for a few, so people have time to get our contact info down and get the candidates' links. But other than that, thank you all so much for coming this year and getting involved in your community and attending even after we moved online. Yeah, thank you so much.